Welcome back into Mining Stock Daily, everybody. Trevor Hall here. Moving along with the day with a corporate update from Western Copper and Gold. They do trade on the TSX and the NYSE American with WRN. They've been a long-time sponsor of the podcast. And with me from the company, the returning champion, Mr. Paul West-Sells, CEO. Paul, welcome back to the podcast.
Trevor, always a pleasure to talk to you.
It hasn't been too long. You and I enjoyed a wonderful meal in London last week and got to kind of catch up on a couple of different things. And so we'll welcome you back on the podcast so we can open up the conversation to a public forum a little bit. But I know you're in London. Obviously, there were some important meetings to be had last week. You weren't the only one in London for the LME Week festivities with important meetings. But give us a sense. I mean, obviously, there hasn't been any news out, that material news that required a news release, but I think people would love to know, how were the conversations regarding Casino last week?
Yeah, no, it was a good week, LME Week, and I caught up with a number of groups, but of course, I think importantly, I had a chance to get to catch up with both Mitsubishi and Rio Tinto, and both. Obviously, with Mitsubishi, we're in the middle of our agreement. Our investor rights agreement goes until March 2025, and so we're in the first bits of it, and that was really around some drilling that we did this year, and then that's going to turn into some met work next year. And it was actually an interesting conversation. They sent up a number of their geologists up to site, and Mitsubishi doesn't have a lot of places where they can send geologists to an exploration site, so they were pretty excited about that, and really appreciated the opportunity for them to get some of their young geologists really, really well trained up. And then met with Rio. You met with the senior team at Rio in London, and of course the question there is what's next. I mean, our current agreement with Rio expires. Our investor rights agreement expires at the end of November. They remain very keen on the project. We talked about what's going to be next, and I can't, of course, get into that now, but what I can say is that it was a very positive conversation, and I'm excited actually about what's going to be next with them.
What are the options on the table there if that investor rights agreement expires in November? This is coming on after that year extension that was already in place from last year. What are the options on the table now between Western and Rio?
Well, I mean, I guess you can say all the options are on the table, right? I mean, the one thing that I would point out is that when we extended the agreement, essentially a year ago, that was built into that agreement. So built into the original agreement was the option for a 1-year extension. Right. There's no additional extension option. So if we were to contemplate anything further with Rio, it would be a new agreement with them.
Okay, very good. I guess this market has created a little bit of a conundrum, specifically for late development projects. Casino is not one of is not the only one out there, but the valuations have just been absolutely beaten up. Little inflows, little interest. Obviously, I don't have to tell you that, but with a project like Casino that is meant for these mines, these generational type mines do not come around very often, or these mining opportunities. And so you're looking for an acquirer of some sort. Now, does that include both of your partners, Mitsubishi and Rio? I guess we're yet to see. But in this kind of time of low valuations, what is the conversation or the thought process that you and your board are having regarding selling this thing, knowing that you have been valued at a much higher spot in recent years, and now here you are coming in your crunch time with Rio, and your valuation now is not that where it once was? I hope that makes sense of the question. There's a lot there.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, If you're in discussions for acquisition, you want to negotiate from strength and
Right.
name a explorer development mining company right now, and none of us are in positions of strength, and we're no different. Although I would point out that we certainly have pulled back, but not to the extent that some have. But yeah, it's it is a very interesting situation in that we have this dialogue happening where in around critical minerals and around electrification and around the importance of copper and you have governments. I mean, we just signed up and we're going to be in New York in December, and it's this big critical minerals thing that's being put on by Canadian government to appease to the U.S. Because the U.S. government is really pushing this, and yet every mining company is not doing very well in terms of their share price. So, I mean, the thing that is, I think, we're in a good position, and the reason that we're in a good position is because, as you know, the challenge with junior mining companies is that until you sell the project, until you get into production, you really are reliant upon funding, investors continuing to invest. So in a situation like we have right now, those investors are sitting on the sidelines, and that's one of the reasons you've seen the pullback in share prices. Whereas with us, a couple of things. First of all, we have an enviable cash position. Mid-year, we had $36 million. We'll end well above 20 by the end of the year. And we have Rio, Mitsubishi as our strategic partners, as important people that can provide funding if required. It's in their interest. I mean, they made their strategic investments because they like the project. They want to be, eventually a big part of the project. And so, they do remain sources of funding in terms of moving forward.
Um, Let me ask you about the copper market here. We just had a discussion yesterday with George Ogilvy from Arizona Sonoran. They obviously published their updated resource estimate. And we've talked about time. I asked him about the timing of that project development and where we're at in the cycle, the copper cycle. Things haven't been great in copper. In fact, I've been probably one of the more outspoken. I don't know if bearish is the right word, but concerned about copper in the short term, but certainly not in the long term here. But give us a sense of the things you were hearing regarding the copper market in London last week, other than some of the biggest copper promoters standing by their copper position and going out of their way and saying to maybe short the lithium producers. That was an interesting conversation at the Canadian Mining Symposium. But to give us a sense of where you heard about copper last week.
Yeah. No, I won't be as bold as to say to short lithium, but I'd certainly say copper is a better bet in the short, medium, and long term. Yeah, it's well, we're in this interesting position right now. We're coming off of the China really dominating what happens with the copper market, and moving into really electrification and energy transition as the big drivers. And so we're sort of in between those two. But over the last, I mean, again, the thing about LME Week is you run into all these different people, and this was not Rio or Mitsubishi. It was actually running into a couple other people, and yeah, I mean, what they were saying is what's happening right now is there's a large trading house actually that had built up a position that they need to unwind, and so you're seeing that in terms of LME stocks are going up. And copper prices impacted, but negatively impacted by that. And really, this is just an unwinding of a position. And I think that it'll work its way through here over the next little few weeks. And then, things will be back to normal. Because if you look actually at the data out of China, I mean, they're importing like crazy. So, China's importing like crazy. You have electrification happening, yet we've got stocks going up and prices got pressure on it. So it's like, something isn't adding up, and that's the part that isn't adding up. And this seems to happen every I don't know, 10 years or so, where, some big trading house has some big position and they have to unwind it, and you hear about it after the fact, and it's, somebody got fired and somebody got too far out over their skis, as those of us from skiing jurisdiction refer to it as, and then that's got to get unwound. So anyhow, that's a rumor I heard.
Sure.
Whether or not it remains to be true, guess we'll find out here, in the aftermath of everything.
Yeah. All right. Well, copper rumors are one thing. How about any gold rumors? I was on the airplane Friday flying home when gold made that $60 run, Paul. I believe you were still in London. What were you hearing of the cause of this? I mean, there's a number of things that you could kind of point to why gold made that massive run in one day, whether it was a short squeeze or people just not wanting to be short gold through the geopolitical situation in the Middle East through the weekend. But here we are, still holding those highs in the gold price, relatively close. What were you hearing on the gold trade, if anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the geopolitical situation in the Middle East. I mean, having been in this industry for the amount of years that I have, you see, I mean, let's be honest, it's a bit of a sad reflection, but wars are good for the price of gold initially. I mean, it sort of is. There's a knee-jerk reaction into gold, and it drives the price up. It doesn't tend to, it locks into a certain extent. It doesn't sort of continue to go. It's sort of like once things start, there's a bump. We've seen that here. You saw that, when Russia and Ukraine started, et cetera. So I mean that this is sort of a typical reaction that you see. Now, I was surprised at the magnitude. It was, but I mean, I think it was more of a reflection on how the pressures on the gold price. Like, it sort of, there wasn't a really good reason for gold to drop from low 1900s to low 1800s, and so I think that sort of came back. That's why it sort of came back as well as it did.
All right. I think the last question I had for you, Paul, because last time you and I talked was last month at the Precious Metals Summit. We talked a little bit about your assessment guidelines for casino, and also we hinted kind of more about the development of connecting Yukon with BC Hydro. Any sort of new developments on that side of things over the last few weeks? I mean, that's really important news to be following, not just for casino, but for all of Yukon.
Yeah, no, and yeah, that's, I mean, if that is going to be a big focus of what we're doing. I mean, and I mean, one thing I can share about our conversations with Rio is that's a big focus for them as well, is green power. I mean, everybody, I mean, every mining company, particularly the major mining companies, are really looking to source green power, green copper. These are important things to investors. These are important things to average Canadians and average people in the mining industry. So it's I'd actually just talked to the Yukon government yesterday about it. It's they're really driving this. I mean, it's obviously something that is important to us and our company for the casino project, but in the Yukon in more general terms, I mean, this is a jurisdiction that's running out of power. And, when they're running out of power, what do? They just keep renting diesel generators, right? So I mean, a diesel generator, short of a coal-fired power plant, is about as dirty a power as you can get. But like, it's also, you can just phone someone up and get it the next day, and it stops the bleeding, right? So they need a long-term solution. We would like to have a long-term solution. Rio is looking for a long-term solution. So we're all pulling in the same direction on this, and yeah, it's a big focus of what we're doing. And yeah, I mean, I think I talked to Yukon government. They're making good progress, and hopefully, I'm hoping we can get some announcements out of the government here by the end of the year. But we'll see how things go.
All right, very good. All right, Paul, great conversation. Thanks so much for that insight here. I will obviously be following very closely in the coming weeks, expecting a little bit more clarity and news out of your partnerships you have there. But until then, stay safe. I'm assuming the camp's starting to wind down for the year.
Oh yeah, no, the camp's closed. Yeah, no,
Camp is closed.
it is wound down. Yep.
Okay. All right.
But I mean, yeah, that was a week and a half ago. I guess it fully closed down. So yeah, no. Next
Okay.
thing will be some assays coming out here on the drilling and kicking off the Met program, and then yeah, and then of course the big thing is going to be what's next with Rio, and as I said, we had a good discussion, and stay tuned.
All right. All right, everybody. That's your update from Western Copper and Gold and CEO Paul West-Sells. We'll be back tomorrow morning with the morning briefing. Have a wonderful evening.